What would you do if the neighbor's innocent little angel turned into your family's biggest nightmare, and every time you complained, his mother laughed in your face? This isn't just an annoying neighbor story. This is the day entitlement nearly tore my family apart, until the law finally stepped in. It began on what should have been a calm summer evening. My wife and I were on the porch, watching our kids chase each other in the yard. The crickets sang, the air was cool, everything felt peaceful, until Karen's son, Tyler, roared down the street on his dirt bike. No helmet, no rules, stereo so loud it rattled our windows. He swerved by our mailbox, laughing like he owned the block. At first, I let it go. Boys make noise, right? But soon, Tyler wasn't just on the street, he was in my yard. Tearing ruts through the grass, chucking soda cans like my property was his trash can. My kids would bolt inside at the sound of his engine. When I asked Karen to rein him in, she just smirked. "Relax," she said, "he's just a kid." That smugness burned hotter than his exhaust. Then came the night that changed everything. Tyler cornered my daughter at the end of the street. He revved the bike inches from her legs, spraying dirt and gravel into her face. She came home sobbing, her knees scraped, her confidence crushed. At that moment, I realized Karen wasn't just brushing things off, she was feeding his arrogance. She believed her wah pull and self-importance made them untouchable. But she was about to learn otherwise. The next morning, I confronted her calmly. I told her what Tyler had done, how he terrified my daughter. She didn't apologize. She laughed. "Your daughter needs to toughen up. Boys will be boys." Those 4 words sliced through me. It wasn't ignorance, it was mockery. I warned her, "If this keeps up, I'll call the police." Her smile vanished, replaced with a venomous glare. "Do that," she hissed, "and you'll regret it." Things only escalated. That afternoon, Tyler and 2 of his friends circled our house, engines growling like predators. They shouted insults, daring my kids to come outside. Gravel sprayed across my driveway as they sped off laughing. That weekend, they cut across my backyard, shredded the grass, crushed my kid's soccer net, then flipped me off as Tyler shouted, "You can't stop me. My mom runs this neighborhood." That was it. If Karen thought her influence made them invincible, she was wrong. I wasn't calling the WA, I was calling the police. With shaking hands, I explained everything: the harassment, the trespassing, the threats. The officer's tone hardened when I mentioned my daughter. 20 minutes later, a patrol car pulled up. Blue lights flashed, neighbors peeked from windows. Karen stormed out in her robe, Tyler smirking at her side. I laid out every detail. The officer took notes, watching Tyler's grin fade. Karen scoffed, crossed her arms, and snapped, "He's just a kid. Boys ride bikes. These people are overreacting. My son has every right." She jabbed a finger at me like I was the criminal. The officer turned to Tyler. "Did you enter their yard? Did you threaten their daughter?" Tyler froze. Karen barked, "Don't answer that. Bad move." The officer's tone sharpened. "Ma'am, trespassing and harassment are not kid games. They're crimes." For the first time, Karen's mask cracked. She sputtered excuses, but the officer wasn't buying it. He issued Tyler a formal warning. Next time, it would be charges. Karen spat venom at me as the officer left. "You think you've won? This isn't over." And she meant it. The very next morning, her rage exploded. I woke to her screaming in the street, pointing at my house. "This man harasses my son. He called the cops on a child." Neighbors gathered. I stayed calm. "Karen," I said, "your son isn't a little boy anymore. He threatened my daughter. He trespassed. That's why the police came." Murmurs spread through the crowd. For once, Karen wasn't being cheered, she was being doubted. But Tyler doubled down. He stomped toward my driveway, yelling, "This neighborhood belongs to us." Then he grabbed a rock and hurled it at my mailbox. The loud clang sent my kids screaming inside. That was the final straw. I dialed the police again, this time for charges. 2 officers returned. When they pulled out handcuffs, Tyler's fake confidence vanished. Karen shrieked, "You can't arrest him. He's just a kid." The officer's response silenced the block, "He's old enough to know better. And you've done nothing but enable him. Actions have consequences." The cuffs clicked shut. Tyler's smirk was gone, replaced by fear. Karen screamed about lawsuits and knowing people, but no one cared anymore. The neighbors had seen the truth. That night, my home was quiet. My daughter finally slept peacefully. And Karen, she learned entitlement doesn't shield you from justice. So remember this: the next time someone excuses bad behavior with, "He's just a kid," sometimes, "just a kid," is exactly the problem. For a short while, I actually believed things might improve. After all my emails, photos, and the not-so-subtle glares I threw at Karen's son every time he waltzed past me, I thought maybe he'd get the hint. Maybe, just maybe, he'd start parking somewhere else. But entitlement doesn't just vanish overnight, it feeds on attention, and clearly, he was thriving. One morning, I walked out to find the Porsche not only parked in my spot, but parked so carelessly that the back bumper jutted over the line. It looked less like a car in a space and more like a trophy on display, gleaming red under the lamppost as if mocking me. I snapped another picture for my evidence folder, but this time my hands were shaking. It wasn't just irritation anymore, it was anger bubbling dangerously close to the surface. Later that afternoon, I confronted him directly. He was lounging in the driver's seat with the window down, scrolling on his phone, engine idling. I tapped the glass. He rolled it down slowly, flashing a smirk that made my blood pressure spike. "You need to stop parking here. This is my assigned spot. I've told you before." He didn't even look up from his phone. "And I've told you, it's just a spot. Chill out. Do you pay HOA fees?" I snapped. He chuckled. "Nah, my mom handles all that. You should talk to her." That smugness, God, it was like nails on a chalkboard. "I have talked to her," I said through gritted teeth. "And she thinks it's fine. But it's not. You're making my life harder every single day." Finally, he looked at me, his smirk widening into a grin. "Sounds like a you problem." Then, with exaggerated slowness, he rolled the window back up, revved the engine like a teenager desperate for attention, and pulled out of the spot, leaving behind the stench of exhaust and my simmering fury. I stood there in the lot, fists clenched, jaw tight. That was the moment something inside me cracked. I had played the role of the reasonable neighbor long enough. The days that followed only made things worse. I'd come home to find him blocking 2 spaces, his Porsche sprawled diagonally like he owned the whole row. Once, he left it idling in my spot for an hour, blasting music so loud the bass rattled my windows. I called the HOA emergency line, but of course, nobody picked up. And when I cornered Karen about it, she gave me that same condescending tone. "He's young, dear. Boys will be boys. Don't let it bother you so much. Boys will be boys." That phrase echoed in my head like poison. No, this wasn't some harmless prank. This was calculated disrespect. This was them testing how much they could get away with. By now, I had spoken to other neighbors, and it turned out I wasn't the only one on the receiving end of Karen's favoritism. One woman told me Karen's son had blocked her driveway once, and when she complained, Karen called her rude and unneighborly. Another guy said Karen fined him for leaving his trash cans out a day late, but when her son left beer bottles scattered around the pool area, no citation was issued. Clearly, the rules in this community weren't rules at all. They were weapons Karen used against everyone else while shielding her own family. The final straw, the moment that erased any hesitation, came on a Sunday morning. I had to leave early for an out-of-town meeting, and when I stepped outside, there it was, the Porsche, parked squarely across my spot and the one next to it. The audacity was staggering. He hadn't even tried to park properly. It was a deliberate, arrogant blockade. I honked my horn, hoping he might come out, but the house stayed dark. My heart pounded with rage as I realized I was about to miss my meeting because this spoiled brat decided his Porsche deserved 2 spaces. I ended up hauling my luggage down the street to a distant visitor spot, soaking my clothes in sweat before I even hit the freeway. That drive was where my decision hardened. Every mile I put between myself and that neighborhood, the more I replayed his smirk, Karen's dismissive voice, the image of my groceries ruined in the rain. I wasn't just irritated anymore, I was done. Done being ignored. Done being walked over. Done letting an entitled kid and his power-drunk mother dictate my life. By the time I pulled back into the lot that evening, I had a plan forming. Not a complaint, not another pointless photo or email, but a real plan. One that would make them finally understand what it felt like to have something you valued treated with contempt. I parked in a faraway corner, staring at the Porsche as it gleamed under the lamppost, mocking me yet again. The storm in my chest calmed, replaced by something colder, sharper. For weeks, they'd underestimated me. They thought I was harmless, just another pushover neighbor who'd grumble but never act. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The next morning, I walked outside with a strange calmness. The kind of calm you only feel when you've made up your mind. And sure enough, There it was again, the Porsche, sitting in my spot like a throne on asphalt. It gleamed proudly in the sunlight, red paint polished to perfection, as though mocking me for ever thinking I had a right to stand up against it. But today, I didn't feel angry. Today, I felt ready. I'd spent the night before mapping out every detail of my plan. Weeks of frustration had given me enough fuel to get creative. I wasn't just going to complain anymore, I was going to send a message. One so loud that neither Karen nor her son would ever forget it. I waited until mid-afternoon, when the lot was quiet and most of the neighbors were away. Then I brought out my tools, a heavy-duty tow strap I'd borrowed from a buddy who owned a garage, a sledgehammer I usually kept for yard work, and my phone, ready to record every second. If Karen wanted to play the WA game, fine, I'd play, but I'd play dirty. First, I hooked the tow strap to the frame of my old pickup. The sight of my rusting truck chained to that spotless Porsche was enough to make me grin. Then, with a slow push on the gas, I yanked it sideways out of my spot, dragging the Porsche across the asphalt like a stubborn child being pulled by the ear. The screech of metal on pavement echoed through the lot, and my pulse quickened. I parked it right across two visitor spots, leaving the Porsche at a crooked angle like a discarded toy. To anyone watching, it looked like an accident. But I wasn't done. I set the camera on a tripod, angled perfectly, and walked up to the Porsche with the sledgehammer in hand. For a moment, I just stood there, staring at my reflection in the shiny red paint. It wasn't just a car anymore, it was a symbol of entitlement, disrespect, and the system that had let them walk all over me. The first swing was the hardest. The hammer came down with a crunch, shattering the headlight like fragile glass. Shards scattered across the pavement, and I exhaled, almost dizzy with adrenaline. The second swing was easier, straight into the hood, leaving a crater where once there had been perfect glossy paint. I didn't stop. Swing after swing, I dented doors, smashed mirrors, shattered windows. The Porsche groaned under each blow, losing its elegance, losing its arrogance. By the time I stepped back, sweat dripping down my forehead, the car was barely recognizable. It wasn't sleek anymore, it wasn't powerful, it was scrap metal, and oh, it felt good. Of course, I wasn't reckless. I had recorded everything, every dent, every broken piece of glass, every swing of the hammer. Then I uploaded the footage to a private cloud, labeled neatly as evidence. Because here was the twist. I wasn't going to hide what I'd done. I was going to expose the whole ugly story, start to finish. When Karen came storming out later that evening, shrieking at the sight of her precious son's car in ruins, I was already waiting by my truck. She ran straight toward me, face red with fury, finger jabbing the air. What have you done? Do you know how much that car costs? You're finished. I didn't flinch. I pulled out my phone and calmly hit play. The video rolled, clip after clip of her son parking illegally in my spot, blocking me, breaking every WA rule in the book. And then, the finale, me dragging the Porsche, smashing it, turning it into twisted metal. This is what happens, I said evenly, when you ignore the rules, when you disrespect people, when you think you're untouchable. Neighbors began to gather, drawn by Karen's screeching. One by one, they watched the video over my shoulder. And to my surprise, no one looked horrified. Some actually nodded, a few smirked. They had all lived under Karen's thumb too. They knew what this really meant. Karen's threats spilled out, lawsuits, police, WA fines, but the more she raged, the less power her words carried. By the time the police arrived, I was ready. I showed them the video, the months of documentation, the countless ignored complaints. Yes, I admitted calmly, I destroyed the car. But I also have evidence of trespassing, harassment, and WA negligence. It wasn't pretty, it wasn't clean, but it was enough. The Porsche was hauled away that night, covered in scratches and dents, more scrap than luxury. Karen's son stood by silently, his smugness gone, replaced by pale shock. For the first time since this war began, I saw something in his eyes, fear. In me, I didn't feel guilty, not one bit, because this wasn't just about a parking spot anymore. It was about proving a point, that respect isn't optional, and entitlement has consequences. The next morning, spot 27 was empty. My spot, my right. For the first time in months, I slid into it with a smile. And as I shut off my engine and looked across the lot at Karen's house, blinds tightly drawn, I knew one thing for sure, neither she nor her son would ever underestimate me again.